Hello and welcome to the IdeaCast interview series, episodes number 149 and 150. This is a two-parter, and my guest in these two episodes is Dr. Asher Walden. And Asher got his PhD in philosophy and religious studies, and we talk about philosophy and spirituality. We also talk about something that he has undertaken recently, a project called the Empyrean Project, and we talk about that and what that consists of. So it was a wonderful conversation. I'm glad to be a part of bringing Asher's work to greater prominence, even if it's a small contribution on my part with my little show, but I feel as though he deserves to be put in the spotlight a little bit and have his work amplified. So I very much enjoyed the conversation, found it enriching, and I hope you do as well. Thank you so much. I'd like to welcome Asher Walden to the IdeaCast interview series. He and I had a pre-meet a few days ago. Should have recorded it. Great conversation. So I'm looking forward to this one. I will tell, welcome to the YouTube audience, by the way. I will tell you all that this will be a two-part conversation. And in the beginning, we're going to cover some things that Asher's doing in his life right now that I'm fascinated with, and I'm sure you will be too, because it converges very much with the history of this show and where we try to go with conversations. So there will be two parts, having just said that. And Asher, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, on my end too. And like I said, I can intuit my subscribers because I picked them up through various guests, and so that conversations that were had with that guest and the work they do, again, strong overlap, strong convergence, and I think this is going to be a really good conversation for people who are familiar with the channel and the guests that I've had historically. So yeah, it's going to be great. So on that note, if you want, let's be traditional and bring you in. We'll find out a little about who you are and your background and where you're coming from and what led you to start the Empyrean Project, which is one of the things that we're going to be covering in the first half of this conversation.
Yeah, sure. So I was always interested in spirituality and religion. It was my autistic special interest. I just wasn't ever really interested in anything else. And I knew that I always knew that this was not the setup for a lucrative career. And I just sort of didn't care, I guess. I mean, maybe I should have. But I was just, I just studied what I was studied, and I pursued what I pursued, and I didn't really know where it would take me until just these last couple of years where it all sort of came together. So I started out studying Western philosophy in college. And towards the end of my career, I moved into studying a little bit of theology. Taoism I was interested in, the American Transcendentalists I was interested in. And then after college, I actually spent a few years living at a Zen Buddhist monastery, and I was pursuing a monastic path. I was there for about 6 years altogether. That tradition was very, very Zen practice-oriented. We didn't do a lot of sutra study. We talked about precepts and kind of larger social and moral issues a little bit, but really the purpose of the community, the function of the community was to be a practice space. So I did a lot of Zen practice, and I did a lot of kind of housekeeping. I did a lot of dishes and making beds and setting up for retreats and so on. So it was in some ways very peaceful, but in other ways sort of frustrating because I wasn't, although I got a lot out of that practice, it wasn't feeding the more kind of intellectual, I guess, side, the scholarly side of me. So after, that period of time, I left the monastery and I went back to graduate school, and I focused on Christian theology and systematic theology. And that moved me into, just one thing or another, got interested in comparative theology. And I had one teacher in particular who was really kind of a mentor for me, who was interested in the Christian theology of religions. And so if you're looking at other religions from the Christian perspective, you're kind of in a tough bind. And he had a really good way of articulating this challenge. On the one hand, you want to be true to the distinctive insights of your own tradition, the value of your own tradition, but at the same time be open to learning from these other traditions. And so there's sort of a validity question, and it's a particular question within Christianity. It's not such a big problem in other traditions because generally speaking, religions are quite syncretic. Religions are always in conversation with one another. They're always kind of debating and learning and incorporating good insights. So historically, this is actually the norm. It's really only in modern, like really, really pretty modern Christianity that there's the sense that Christianity is the one true religion, or that you have to think that your religion is the one true religion. Mm-hmm. So that was an interesting experience for me because I came away from that having already done really deep dive into Buddhism, and then a deep dive into Christianity. And then later on, I did deep dives into Confucianism and Taoism, which I sort of studied together because they're sort of like equal and opposite kind of complementary perspectives within the Chinese tradition, and some other traditions too. But the idea was always, for me, gathering, and this is really sort of the summary of my project, I guess, gathering the truths, the insights, the wisdom that these different traditions preserve and interpret. And on the other hand, kind of bringing them together, right? Trying, this is sort of the background in systematic thought. The idea that whatever kind of insights, truths, life hacks, right? Tips, tricks, and techniques that they're only really useful, or at least they're maximally useful in a context in which you understand the big picture, right? So you know which tricks to use at which times. You have kind of an overall perspective of where you're going. Because there's going to be times when you don't know what the right wisdom is, or the right trick, or the right technique is. So you need this kind of big picture. So my project, and this is sort of what kind of crystallized in the form of the Empyrean project, was just that, was gathering the truths that were, generally speaking, available in one form or another in many or most of those different wisdom traditions that I studied. And what I found was that certain truths or certain insights were expressed very, very clearly in some traditions, and that those same instincts or those same insights were present in the other traditions, but they were sort of obscured or pushed to the background, just by the, kind of the history of the tradition, I guess, or depending on what was important at the time. And I think that's sort of where we are, right? We have all of these insights. We have access to all of this wisdom. We have access to all of this kind of extraordinarily interesting and beautiful and important and useful wisdom, but we don't quite know how to put it together because it's all backgrounded. Everything that's important in our lives has been forced to the background by money, right? Yeah, and by politics, and by certain kind of cultural, our culture has its own ideas about what's important. Not that we don't have good myths, not that we don't have good insight. It's just that it's so drowned out by kind of the way we live, the nuts and bolts of the way we live nowadays. So the idea of the Empyrean project is just to gather those, the really important things, the important insights, the important truths, the important kind of mile markers in the human project and in how to be human, and collect those together in a very, very clear and intuitively accessible way that's systematic. The system is important because that's what sort of guarantees or tries to make sure that you hit all the important points. And now I have it in the form of a deck of cards, which I just always thought was cool because I like cards. I like, I like shuffling them. I like holding them. I like the materiality of a deck of cards. And so it's meant to be something that, people can sort of carry around with them, something that they can access easily, something that, you can sit down and do a deep dive into exploring the cards in a couple different ways, or you could just pick out one card and say, what's going on here? So Yeah, I think that's probably as good a summary as I can do of the project and what the results are right now.
Yeah. Have you found in your own work with the cards, and you just mentioned this a second ago that you could pull a single card out and meditate on the significance of the card, but cards as relata that can be worked together. I'll refer to the tarot in this instance that, or a deck of playing a game of poker, there's relations. And so in your work and discovery with these cards, similar to those other card modes, are you finding something evolving or emerging out of that is relational, that you can work cards together or maybe lay a hand out like four cards? Yeah, what are you getting from that? What's happening for you there? Or people who are using the deck broadly?
Yeah, sure. So it was designed so that people could use it more or less like a tarot deck. And there's lots of different ways that people use tarot decks.
Right.
And 1 card spread, 3 card spread, ask a question, just a lot of kind of more, I think, kind of more contemplative practices.
Right.
That was sort of my model, that the idea of the tarot deck was sort of was like a kind of a good kind of seed crystal for, I guess, the genre or the format of the information. Put it in the form of a deck of cards. Other than that, and so the tarot deck obviously is my sort of inspiration for that, but other than that, there's not a whole lot of overlap between the Empyrean deck and the tarot deck. I like tarot decks. I have a couple of tarot decks, just like everybody, and I have spent some time with them. But I think that the tarot deck was a really good system 100 years ago. And so it doesn't always resonate with where we are. And also the thing about the tarot deck is that it does require a fair amount of background knowledge in astrology, Kabbalah, the kinds of things that were interesting and important to people in the Western alchemical tradition. Mm-hmm. So I wanted, one difference among others is that I really wanted this deck to be very, very accessible and very intuitive. You could pick up a card and you can see just what it is. There's just one symbol rather than 15 symbols all crammed together on one page. But yeah, I've been doing those kinds of readings. I've been trying out different kinds of spreads to see which ones work better. There's one 8-card spread that's very specifically designed for this deck. Although, like I said, tarot deck spreads, you can use those as well. Mm-hmm. But, generally speaking, I have been really enjoying, as I've been playing with the deck myself, seeing the way the images, resonate and complement one another. You really need 2 or 3 images to sort of to give a complete picture or to tell a story. And it's and then once you start putting these things together, you can find ways to translate different characters in different books or different movies. You can say, oh, this is these 3 cards put together. Oh, and that's what that is, and those kinds of things are useful and just sort of interesting.
Okay. And how many cards are in the deck?
So there's 66 cards in the deck.
Wow. Okay.
So there's 64. The way it's organized is that there are 8 houses with 8 cards in each deck.
Okay.
So that's 64. And then there's kind of 2 wild cards, I guess. Mm. The 8 houses represent, these should be kind of familiar and obvious to anyone. The 8 houses represent kind of the basic aspects of consciousness, the basic aspects of how we function. So one has to do with memory. One has to do with our embodiment being physical bodies. That's the house of life. One has to do with what we would associate with the mind or logos in the sense of the design or the architecture. And then there's one house that has to do with the self, the difficulties, the challenges, the kind of inherent unbalances of being an ego or being a self in the world. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that, generally speaking, the idea is that all these things are important. All of these things are aspects of who we are. that serve a role in our lives, and that all have to be integrated. So the 8 houses represent the dimensions of our lives in which we encounter the sacred, the dimensions of our lives in which we experience the kind of deeper truths of the world, the deeper truths of how existence is sort of structured for us as humans. And then the other 2 cards that are not in any houses are, I call them the Empyrean cards, and they're sort of like the wild cards. And they really represent between them the transcendent aspects of human life. So all of the other houses represent, things that we experience, things that we can do, things that we can look for, things that we can cultivate that give our lives meaning, that gives our lives a sense of substance, of value, joy, connection. But it's also true that we ultimately cannot understand our lives from within our lives, that our lives we sense that our lives have this kind of transcendent dimension, that our lives come from someplace, and after the end of our lives are still going someplace, that there's an ultimate transformation after we die. And not that we have any idea what that looks like specifically, but there are a lot of clues, right? And we have a kind of a template, I guess. We're kind of hardwired with a pattern that draws our attention to the importance of thinking about what happens after we die, or thinking about what the importance or significance of our lives will be after we die, for those we leave behind, for culture, right? People, I think we all know, it seems silly that we have to kind of remind ourselves that it's like so obvious, and yet we forget it so easily, that we all want to build something, right? We want to be remembered for things that we've done, for people we've helped. We want to, raise our children in a certain way so that our children can go on and do great things in the world after we're gone. We want to have, for different people, it might be a work of art or music or math, right? Einsteinian relativity, right? People can contribute something that goes on after they're gone. And we all want that. We all know that our lives, in some sense, our lives have no meaning or importance within our own lives, right? If it's just me, maybe I can be happy, maybe I can be sad, maybe I can feel like I've succeeded or failed. Maybe I can get what I want, or maybe I don't get what I want. But all those things end when I end. All of those things are gone the instant I'm dead. What are the ways, what are the things that go on after we're gone? Those are the things that ultimately give life meaning. And so I guess the model of the cards, the spirituality that's contained in the cards, is that there's like a complementary relationship, I guess, between on the one hand, the kind of immanent or this worldly dimensions of spirituality, of spiritual fulfillment, learning, growth, healing, enlightenment. And then there's also this kind of transcendent dimension. They're the inside and outside of the same box. They're the front and back of the same animal, which is a classical Chinese expression that I really like. They're the front and back of the same animal. Yeah. You can't have one. They just don't make sense. In abstraction from one another. Yeah. So yeah, that's it. I mean, the idea is that the cards, you can play with them. You can use them like tarot cards. There's a cooperative gameplay that I've designed that actually makes sense and is actually kind of fun. Wow. And there's dice, which is so important to me, right? There's a dice game in the game, and there's actually a way to do a tarot spread where you actually use the dice to create the spread. Which is distinctive. And like I said, I think it's fun. Not everybody will think it's fun. Not everybody is excited about dice as I am, but I think the dice are inherently fun. So I was excited to incorporate that aspect into the deck. But at the end of the day, at the end of the day, the idea of the deck is that it's a story, right? It encases a model or an idea about spirituality and just what it means to be human.
Yeah, yeah. I like the dice idea, and I didn't know that before you mentioned this just now. I did some research on what you were doing, but I didn't catch that. And so the dice to me are kind of a stronger signifier in relation to the cards, so that it's random chance maybe that you're rolling the dice and you get that, but those are strong symbols that are coming to you, 3, 5, 7, those are strong, and then they relate back over to the deck, and then you can move over into orders of abstraction and what you're deriving or divining and meaning and things like that. So I like the dice as a kind of lodestar, kind of like a way to kind of move you into your configuration that you're going to be working with. That's so neat. Mm-hmm. To me, it's transportational, I guess. It opens up a space that you determined, and again, happenstantially, or however you want to frame that, but that it moves over to the cards, and then that the cards will give you a much stronger supplementation of meaning, or however you want to say that, a significance brought to you. I like that. Do you want to hold a couple of cards up and talk? Because I know you were drawing on some archetypal, again, symbols and representations. Can we see a couple, and just so the audience has an idea?
Yeah, sure.
And maybe some provenance, like you've obviously got a quite a broad and diverse palette and literacy in terms of the wisdom traditions. So I'm curious to see what you put together.
Sure. I'm going to take out, I didn't plan ahead which cards I might talk about specifically, but
draw a random card.
Well, there's some that are sort of jumping out.
Okay.
And there's some that I think will be interesting from that kind of archetypal perspective. The one, let's see now. So I guess a simple one to start out, and I'll do this kind of quickly.
Sure.
But if you want to do a deeper dive into any of these things, just stop and slow down, because we certainly have to do all these.
Yeah.
But here's one to start. It's the Great Mother, and the icon or the image for the Great Mother for the purposes of the deck is just a chalice.
Okay.
Or think of a cauldron or a womb. Mm-hmm. The idea. So there's 8 houses. One of the houses is the house of life. Every house has a throne, and the throne is sort of like the royalty or the major arcana, I guess.
Okay.
It's the card in the house that holds it all together. So the thing that holds together the house of life is the Great Mother. Obviously, from an archetypal perspective, you can make connections. The Great Mother appears as the Virgin Mary, as the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin, as Kali. There's always we always have a Great Mother, but it's also Mother Earth, right? It's also Hera. It's also psychologically, it's that image of the mother that we all wish we had, but only some of us actually had, right?
Yeah, right.
And it's also that aspect of all of us. I mean, so, and this is what's really important from a Jungian perspective. For Jung, every character in the story represents some aspect of yourself, right? Okay. Every Greek god is a projection of some kind of passion structure, a structure of desire and action, something that's important for human life. It's sort of how we're hardwired. So this, along with all those kind of archetypes, just represents the emotions and the desires that have to do with care, nurture, changing diapers, cuddling cheeks, right? Grabbing someone's cheeks and going, "Oh, look, it's so cute."
Yeah.
Or right? If you have a dog, you pet your dog, kind of cuddle with the dog, so the dog is soft and furry, right? All of those kind of soft, furry, caring, nurturing, nursing, all those emotions are sort of brought together in the kind of persona of the Great Mother. So the Great Mother represents that action or that kind of action. And then the other cards in the house represent kind of more specific dimensions within that broader image, I guess.
Okay.
So that's that. So for example, within the house of life, you also get the child. They're all green, so they're color coded. That makes it easy.
Okay.
There's the child. There's an animal, which represents strength or ferocity. And then there's also one of my very favorite cards in the deck, garden, because the garden represents abundance, the ecosystem. It represents the whole, it represents the idea that the earth itself is like a womb. The earth itself provides for us all the nutrients, the warmth, the containment, the kind of protection that in principle, you know, we have everything that we need. It's given to us free, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the idea of the house of life. Here's another card. This is not a throne card. This is from the House of Glory, which is the yellow house, and it's a lightning bolt. Okay. Again, I picked it because it's one of these things that has very, you know, that appears a lot in ancient mythology. There's particular gods who hold lightning bolts or who have the power of lightning, and it represents action. It represents the moment in which, like if the sky is filled with the static energy, right, and it gets more and more energy, and then finally, all of a sudden, you get that lightning strike, and the energy is grounded, and it does something. And so that represents kind of action, the idea of action. You think about what you want to do, you think about what you want to do, you think about what you want to do. And then sooner or later, not necessarily for any particular reason, you do it. You have to make it, you have to make it real. So generally speaking, the House of Glory is about that desire to do something, to accomplish something, to win, to succeed. So other things in other ideas in the House of Glory have to do with kind of competition, with excellence, with kind of being with ranking. It has to do with ranking because, well, who wins and who loses, right? Who has mastered the thing, who has proven that they're the best versus people who maybe need some more practice or something. Let's see now. Here's another card. It's another card that will be very, very familiar for people who like Greek mythology, the idea of a ship or the boat. And it's called companions. And the idea is that the way we function best, especially if we want to accomplish something, is through teamwork, right? Through developing relationships among people who have the same goal, who have the same desires, who have the same kind of frame of mind, people who we can kind of team up with to do what we do. I've been reading a lot of kind of history of science recently. I'm really into kind of pop science and kind of accessible summaries of what the science is telling us. Right. And one thing that comes out again and again and again is that every single person who you think of as being a great innovator is doing what they do in the context of usually a pretty small group of people who are all working on the same problems, and they're all talking to one another, and they're writing letters to one another, and they're arguing with each other in these very friendly and productive ways. And so you just don't get any great insight. You don't get any great accomplishment without, usually there's one person or maybe a couple of people who are sort of get famous for it. But the reason they got famous for it, the reason they did it was because of all of their, the whole cohort, right? The whole team, the whole group of people who are kind of working right on the same problem and really supporting one another and lifting one another up. So that's just sort of something important. And again, we see that in mythology, we see it in sciences, and we see it in our own lives. And it's something that some of us struggle with. So here's sort of a complementary card. And I think I picked these because they're sort of equal and opposite, I guess. This is a card in the House of the Self. And again, the self is this very sort of challenging, problematic house. It's all the ways in which, it's all the things, it represents all the things that can go wrong, I guess. With on the one hand, we need to be an individual, right? We need to separate ourselves and distinguish ourselves from other, and we need to have good boundaries. And the sort of zenith or the kind of completion of the house of the self is this idea of a tower. Mm-hmm. And again, I shouldn't have to, offer examples of towers, in the Bible, in folklore, in mythology, the idea of isolation. The idea that the tower, that something about being a self means to be isolated, means to be separate from others. And that's a matter of protection, a matter of safety. It's a matter of peace and quiet. But it's also a matter of having the opportunity to do something that no one else can do. So again, friends, a cohort, a scientific society, right? Versus, on the one hand, the chance to get away from those people every once in a while, to take what you've learned, to take, to take the questions that they've handed up, take their insights and say, okay, what am I going to do with this? Right? How am I going to design my own space? Right? So the tower, both of these things are really important to me because I'm autistic. Mm-hmm. So it's challenging for me. This is one of the things that's so difficult for me, to find the people who I can talk to, people who speak the same language, people who are interested in the Jungian archetypes, right? There's not that many of us out there, right? Right. And then on the other hand, in a way, this is easier for me, but precisely because it's easier for me, it's a challenge, right? My challenge is to get out of the tower every once in a while, to make sure that the tower is secure, make sure that the tower is structured in such a way that I can do the work that I want to do, because I'm autistic and I really need people to leave me the heck alone for a large percentage of the day, so that I can feel like myself, so that I can feel sane, right? And just do the work that I want to do. But I can't live here. No one can live here. Mm-hmm. Right? So these cards, all of these cards have checks and balances, I think, is the way to think of it. They're all things that are important, but they overlap in certain ways and they interact in certain ways. And they have, each one has its own wisdom about how to approach it and how to interact with it. And that wisdom, abstractly and symbolically, is right there in the mythology, in the stories, in Harry Potter, in Star Wars. The wisdom is there, and it's just a matter of saying, this isn't just entertainment. This isn't just for fun. This isn't just fantasy. This is a resource for telling the truth. So a good definition of mythology, if you're interested, a good definition of mythology is a lie that tells the truth. Right. Yeah. I like that. It's obviously fantasy. It's obviously a story, but if you scratch underneath the surface of it, it's conveying something that's not just interestingly true, but vitally true and importantly true. And its truth, and this is the other thing about mythology, its truth doesn't really appear until you need it. So another thing about myths that I think is so interesting is that they're sort of like booby traps or time bombs. You read a myth and you say, well, that's an interesting story. And you don't think too much about what it means. But if you remember it, something will happen in your life that's confusing or difficult or doesn't make sense. And all of a sudden, this image will come back to you. And you'll say, aha, that's what that is. That's what's going on. That's what I have been forgetting, or that's what I have been leaving out. And that's why I need to deal with it. So the idea of the cards is to just give very, very simple graphic images that form the basis of a language of ideas, so that when you're struggling with something, when something doesn't make sense, you get just the right card at just the right time, and it acts as sort of like a seed crystal, I guess, around which these other networks of meaning, these other stories, these other things, these other feelings, emotions, can kind of crystallize into a pattern that makes sense.
And I appreciate you mentioning that you are neurodiverse or neurodivergent, and I thinking through the lens of a dyslexic that the symbols are good for, and I don't know where I am with dyslexia. I don't know how severely dyslexic I am. I think the older I get, the weirder it gets. But excuse me, as I choke on my own words, it's hard for. Sorry, I should edit this out. Folks who deal with dyslexia, it's hard to read, it's hard to onboard information in a conventional way. And I think what you're doing with the symbols and the semiotics and so forth, I'm so sorry, I sound like an old man now, is good. It's a tool that I can relate to. And so I appreciate that, it's accessible to folks across the board, but I think folks who may have unique ways of learning or unique ways of perspectively learning, knowing, things like that, that this is a great tool and a great key, whereas other mainstream or conventional means like books and things like that, and not knocking books at all. I like to read, but this is a nice way to do serious play, as John Vervaeke would say. It's to engage with something, let your guard down. Like you say, get out of one tower that, you may be in a nested series of towers. This is a way to extract yourself from a tower. And speaking of the tower and its relation with the companion, I love this idea because earlier you mentioned that our lives are not necessarily for ourselves. So strong individualism, that we can condition ourselves to recognize that we do live in a nexus and that we live with others and for others as well as ourselves. And there doesn't have to be a conflict there. So those two cards in relation with one another, I just love that because, or the self house is wonderful, I think, in that it can help someone who may be self-aware enough to say, how do I network? How do I become an immersive person with others in the psychosocial commons and all that kind of stuff. So I appreciate that. I really think that's great. So two things at once there for you, but just in affording access to folks who are not conventional in onboarding and interpreting, and also helping others. And this, I think, is a diverse neuro-relational, neurosocial kind of thing, is to say, because you hit another thing. I'm sorry, I'm rambling here, but you hit on something else, that society is set up in a way that individualism is, more profitable or more marketable and things like that. Whereas we can be that, but also be aware of our connectedness. So I'll stop there because I'm on a ramble. But so anyway, thank you for what your cards are working on there. And
I think that's what makes. I mean, I think you really hit on what makes spirituality so difficult, so challenging, right? I think we have this idea that. Sometimes traditions seem to convey this idea that the self is bad and you need to transcend the self or get rid of the self or destroy this, and that's not quite true. It's sort of true, but not quite true. Actually, the self is sort of you can't skip that step. Let me put it that way. That it's one of the foundations of who we are, right?
Right.
And so spirituality is not simply about escaping the self or escaping the things of the world that cause us suffering, right? Spirituality, if it's anything, if it's useful at all, is something that we take out into the world, that is kind of the basic dimension of how we engage with the world, with how we make decisions in the world, with how we value relationships and how we make decisions about career and family and hobbies, right? All these things are kind of really are part of our spiritual life, part of our religious life. Religion isn't just what you do on Sunday morning, right? Religion is kind of infused in all these ways. And if there's some part of your life in which that spirituality or that perspective is not infused, then what you get is an experience that's very flat and very unsatisfying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And when you, and I always love the etymology of words. When you look at religare, or the root word of religion, which is to rebind, we can think of rebind, or, it's connection, it's reconnection, it's rediscovery. And it could be with whatever you consider divinity to be. It could also be the relations that are important in community. We are social creatures. We are social creatures. Say that forever. Mm-hmm. We are social creatures. We are not tower creatures. But mm-hmm. I love what you just said, that we have to oscillate and we have to have that dimensional freedom there on that it's like a dipole perhaps, but maybe not, that we can oscillate between the retreat, as you said, that's necessary for you, and also the collaboration, and finding that oscillatory capacity to do that. And it's unique for all of us. I'm like you. There's times I consider myself like an ambivert. There's times when I can go out, I can be blah, 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 I can get engaged. And then there's other times I don't want to go out of the house for 2 days, 3 days. I just want to hide and just whatever I do. So yeah, I think for each of us, we each have our own diversity in that sense. It's like we have moments and we have other moments, and then we have to allow other people that too, and never, sort of impinge upon them for their sensibility in that regard. So
yeah.
Let me see. I want to trying to think of direction here. Maybe a couple more technical questions. Where is your deck available right now? I'll have, and I'll pause for a second. YouTube audience, I'll have all the links for Asher down below, his website, also YouTube channel. There's more explanation of the cards on the YouTube channel, so we'll get that available too. So, okay, I'll pass that back on.
Yeah, so just, if you just go to that landing page, the website that should be visible there, www.empyreanproject.com. That has, some general introduction to the project and to the deck. Has links to the YouTube library, which I've been kind of, it's sort of slow going. I'm trying to figure out the best way to kind of present the material and figure out what's going to be interesting to people. But there's some resources there. I've also started a blog, which is more specific, which is called Spirituality on the Spectrum, and that's some stuff about the cards, but also some stuff about just my own experience and spirituality more generally. Let's see. And on that website soon, not today, but soon, will be links to order your own copy of the deck. It's a package that comes in a box from, a game manufacturer that you'll order it directly from them. And it has the deck, a book that goes along with it, and dice, and a dice pouch, and, some other little things. So it's a whole package.
Okay. Now here's a counterintuitive question, but I think you'll catch it. I think it'll resonate with you. How successful do you want to be with this project? I mean it partly commercially, but also I know the obvious, like the non-commercial success of this, sky's the limit. I'm intuiting, and you can check me if you want on that. But what are you visioning for yourself in terms of this rhizomially reaching out into the world and having its impact, again, both in a marketing sense as well as soul touching sense?
Sure. Yeah. I'm not banking on selling a lot of copies of the deck. Let me put it that way. It's not I am not wild. I would love for this thing to go viral and for everybody to kind of say, oh, wow, this is really cool. And for it to be as popular as the tarot deck or more popular actually. But I'm sort of not banking on that. My idea is that it's more important to be more helpful to a smaller group of people than to be minimally helpful to lots and lots of people. Right. Okay. So there's some music out there that's pop music and everybody likes it. Everybody listens to it, hears it on the radio until they get sick of it and then they forget about it. Right. And then there's other music that's sort of underground, that people have, people are sort of proud of loving these artists and musicians that maybe no one else has ever heard of. And that's sort of what makes it cool. And that's what makes it special. There's music that, I can think of certain bands and certain musicians that never really made it big, but that were so creative and so interesting. And I think music saves lives. I think that if you have good music and good songs, they can really get you through depression, really get you through some hard times. So I would rather be that kind of low to middling popularity, I guess, where the people who really get it and really appreciate it. And, maybe it's not for everybody, and that's okay.
Yeah. No, I love that answer, because there's a dilemma there, I think. And it also happens with someone who may be an orator or a speaker, or somebody who has a passion about something, and they build up. They start small, they get small groups, and they talk about things. Could be Hermeticism, or maybe the New Age circuit, something like that. And their faith is good, their heart is in the right place, but there's a dilution factor, and there's also a co-opting and interpretive factor that I think occurs with people, and then they suddenly get turned into some kind of weird guru type, and maybe they didn't want that, but maybe they're riding that wave where the gravity's got them. So, and I'm not going to name anybody, but that happens to people, I think. And so what I'm maybe thinking or imagining with the cards, as you've just articulated, is that it has its niche, it has its space, and that if it were to supersede that space or transcend what its best optimal niche is, that there is a potential for dilution or misinterpretation or recreation and then dismissal, like you said, something consumable that gets tossed away. And whereas like you said, I think I'm agreeing, but I'm also maybe overemphasizing that, it has its place. And so that's perhaps what I was trying to mine from you in the question is that's a tough dilemma, because, it's almost, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, a kind of a complementary way to think about it is just to say that this, the deck of cards, again, I'm happy for it to take on a life of its own. I'm happy for people to have it and to explore what they want to do with it, what they want to use it for. And my hope is that the structure of the deck itself is sort of tight enough and clear enough that it can sort of survive, after I'm gone. Mm-hmm. But it's not, I think what makes it strong, what I think makes it robust is that it's not its own spiritual practice. It's not a cult, right? It's not a religion. It's not a spiritual thing. What it really is a kind of it's almost more academic, right? It's a model of what spirituality should look. It's like a set of criteria. It says, whatever, if you're a Buddhist, great, be a Buddhist. If you're a Christian, great, be a Christian. Or if you're, kind of a more kind of loosey-goosey, kind of New Age spirituality, kind of ongoing exploration, that's great. What matters is that you have an experience and a way of talking about these things, right? It's like a list of questions, right? Each one of these things is its own sort of point of reference. Can you answer what is your relationship like to, where in your life are you the caregiver? Where in your life are you the mother? And if you don't have an answer to that, that's a problem. You're missing something. You're sort of failing that. And similarly with things like the tower, where do you have in your life where you can be alone? Where do you have in your life where you can be in your tower and get the energy, get the specific kind of spiritual fuel, I guess, that comes from being alone? Because if you're burnt out and tired and angry at everyone, that may be because you don't have a tower, or you've forgotten to go there sometimes, right?
Right.
So all of these things are important. Or again, my favorite card, the garden, right? There's many religious traditions that talk about the earth, that talk about stewardship, that talk about life, and interdependence, right, and ecology. what's your relationship like to the natural world? What is your relationship like to the ground, to the land?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is this the land that your ancestors grew up on? And if not, have you found a way to connect to the spirits of the land? Because if you haven't, that's going to be a problem, right? There's going to be something that you're missing in your psychology, in your practice. So again, there's not necessarily a right answer to any of these things, but there has to be an answer, and that answer has to be grounded in your experience, right? You have to find a way to experience these things. And if you do, then you have a very robust spiritual practice, whether it's a Buddhist spiritual practice or a Christian spiritual practice or something else entirely. If you have ways of accessing all of these resources, it's just like, it's just like getting the nutrients you need in your diet, right? Mm-hmm. You can eat a 100% American diet or an Italian diet or a Japanese diet, but whatever diet you have, you got to be getting your protein, you got to be getting your fiber, and you got to be getting not too much of the things that we all eat too much of, right?
Right. Yeah. Sugar, salt, grease.
Yeah.
All right, Asher, I think what I'd like to do is open up a small amount of space right now to conclude, to sort of coalesce back down what we were covering the last 45 minutes to an hour, and we'll give ourselves a few minutes for that, and then I think we'll go to a second part and invite the audience to watch part 2, which will be released. This is only valid for publication day, but both chapters will be released on the same day. So if you're watching this, a week after it's been published, it doesn't matter. But anyway, just saying that for my sake, probably more than anything. But yeah, let's do a summative statement or something that you want to do that would tie this thing, this time we spent together, and then we'll move on to whatever it is we do. I'm not even going to project. Yeah, try to estimate what we're going to do. But it'll be fun, YouTube folks. It'll be a good conversation. So anyway, I'll hand it back to you, Asher, and however you want to wrap this one up.
Yeah, sure. A deck of cards, which is fun and interesting to play with, that encases ways and locations for extracting a sense of meaning, a sense of value, a sense of joy from the world, and knowing our place. The language for telling a story about what's important to us and about what our lives are about, a sense of balance between the things that we know we're already good at versus the things that are important, but that we haven't done yet, or that we haven't experienced it, or that are sort of foreign to our personality type, right? Ways of sort of showcasing blind spots if we have them, right? This isn't the kind of oracle deck where every single card says you're doing great, good job, keep it up.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's plenty of oracle decks like that out there, right?
Right.
Right. Or you might have a good deck, like, a good tarot deck, and you might have a reader who interprets every card to mean great job, keep it up, and I don't think that that's all that useful. I think that there are times where we need validations, there are times where we need support, but there are other times where we need concrete information about where we need to go next, where we are. And that's what this deck is about. It's guideposts of like really, just to help us see very, very clearly, where are we now and what's going on around us now, and where are the tensions, where are the obstructions, where are the problems, but also where are the workarounds, and where's the gold, and where are the resources, and where are the places where we can actually just sit and look around and saying, oh, you know what, this actually is kind of a cool place to be right now. Even though it's hard, even though it's frightening, there's things about it that are just so valuable and interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in listening to you and understanding more about the deck, I'm coming to appreciate how the universality of the deck, the mythos the power of the mythos and the episteme within the mythos, as you were saying earlier, how it's a lie that bears the truth, that penetrates the diversity of uniqueness as of the self, of individual identity, ego, persona, all these things, these layers that we have, and that we're all, we're thumbprints, we're all so unique, but this stands above that, and it can penetrate, and for those that are curious and hungry and want to explore the mythos and the semiotics and all these things. So, what a wonderful construct, and I think what we can do in the next conversation is celebrate some things that are about the deck, but also, what we can value in the results of the work and wherever else we want to go. So maybe that's a little teaser for the next conversation. But Asher, it's been a lovely conversation, and thank you so much for both myself and the audience, just for getting us a little more enlightened and informed about what you're doing. I think it's amazing. It really is convergent with how I try to inquire into the world and sense make into the world. And so I appreciate that very much. So we'll stop here and we'll pick up in part 2. I'll thank the YouTube audience for your time and attention. And like I said, just jump over unless you want to go take a coffee break and then come back. Whatever you wish to do. See it next week if you want. But anyway, Asher and I will be back for a part 2, and it'll be in the string of uploads on YouTube and Spotify. So thank you all so very much. Asher, thank you again. I'll just stop recording and then we'll take a break and then we'll come back and do part 2. So take care, everyone.